If Uncle Sam were a real person, he'd have a credit score of 458. He is flat broke. Worse, he's a deadbeat. He doesn't budget. He spends more than he makes, and he's so far in debt, he'd have to go to a loan shark to borrow any more. He's terrible at business. Every one of his ventures have lost money. He spends twice as much as his competitors to produce products that are only half as good. Yet this man, this degenerate spendthrift, touches 25 cents of every dollar generated by the people of this great nation. Now, I spent the morning doing a deep dive through the numbers. And I mean the real ones, the ones from the United States Treasury, not the half-truth sound bites politicians toss around. And today I'm going to break it all down for you. I'll show you where our money's going, why the debt will continue to rise, and why I believe firmly that gold is not just a good investment, but a necessary one. Now, the United States Treasury has a website. This is it here. It's fiscaldata.treasury.gov, and you can see it gives spending breakdowns. You can go even much deeper in here and see where the money is flowing. You can look at the total spending versus GDP. There are even monthly reports like this one laying out every dollar that has come in and out of the federal government, breaking it down by source, outlay, and everything in between. But unless you're an accountant, these numbers are probably going to bore you. So I put together a summary and simplified it. So here are the numbers. Now, I've pulled the data from 2024 only because the time of this recording, we are not all the way through 2025. And I thought it better to get a full comprehensive year. But just know the numbers are pretty much exactly the same as what we saw last year, deficit, all of it, okay? So here it is. 2024 spending, every dollar spent by the United States federal government totaled $6.95 trillion. Yes, there are 4 commas in that number. It's a biggie. And it's broken down by category. You can see the percentages over here on the right. Just a little fun fact. These are the exact numbers that came from the Treasury website. They do add up to 99. That's government math for you. So here we can see $1.6 trillion to Social Security, big chunks to Medicaid. They have it just listed as health, which I'm sure is a combination of Medicaid plus all the massive government subsidies that were introduced during Obamacare. You got national defense at just under $1 trillion. I think it is going to be $1 trillion for 2025. Unemployment insurance, veterans benefits, transport, environment, justice, et cetera, et cetera. Now, below that is the tax receipts. That's how much money the government brought in, both from personal income tax, payroll tax, corporate tax, all of it. And it came in at just under $5 trillion, 4.91 trillion to be exact. So that creates a deficit of $2.03 trillion. Now, you may see them quote the figure of $1.8 trillion, but that was the estimate, and it included the total tax revenue before tax refunds. So the actual number from the U.S. Treasury data is just over $2 trillion. So this deficit, which is, again, the difference between what you brought in and what you spent, is new debt. So that was added to our federal debt, bringing that total to $38 trillion and climbing by the hour. So here's the summation. 4.9 trillion came in, 6.9 trillion went out, creating a deficit of just over 2 trillion, bringing our total debt to 38 trillion. And this is from 2025, but in the big beautiful bill, they increased the debt ceiling by another $5 trillion, allowing them to borrow more money. So let's look at this as if it were a person. So I just moved the decimal point over 7 places. And then when we do that, you come at some more reasonable numbers for an individual. So if Uncle Sam were a person, this is what his financial life would look like. So he would have a salary of $49,181. That year, his expenses, what he spent was $69,500, more than 20 grand over his income. So that's new debt that he has to put on his credit card. Added to the other debt, he's been doing this for 20 years, bringing his American Express card balance to $380,000. This is a guy who makes 49 grand a year and has 380 grand on his Amex card. And then he went up in arms, made a big fuss, demanding to increase his limit, and they gave it to him. They raised his Amex limit by $50,000. This is what the federal government budget looks like if it were a person. Now, this is not a guy you would lend money to. If you did, it's pretty much a write-off. You know it's not going to come back. The only reason Uncle Sam gets to borrow money is because he can print new money to pay it back. But therein lies the problem. You see, all that money printing causes inflation. When you were increasing the money supply by $2 to $3 trillion a year, it was way worse during COVID. That means you've got a whole lot more dollars chasing the same number of goods and services. And that, kids, is what causes inflation. Not corporate greed, not price gouging, not speculation, increasing the money supply. That's the reason the value of the United States dollar has lost 98% of its value since the Federal Reserve was founded. And the Federal Reserve is, of course, the entity that gained the power to print money. So, with this backdrop, knowing what kind of a deadbeat we are dealing with, I think we can all surmise we don't want to buy a government bond. This is not the guy we want to lend money to. And since he's got his garage printing press running around the clock, throwing this funny money all over the place, it stands to reason those dollars are going to be worth less and less and less this year and next year and the year after and on into the future. In fact, this cycle is spiraling. What we saw in 2021 and 2022 when inflation ramped up to 7 to 8%, by the way, don't trust those government numbers. They're cooking these books every possible way they can. It's usually much, much, much worse. Go look at your health insurance bill. I just got an update. Mine went up 20% and the benefits got worse. So make that make sense. But as this situation gets worse, here's what we are seeing. Now that this deficit has widened over $2 trillion, and by the way, it goes way, way up if you get an economic recession, if you get another pandemic, anything like that. This is as good as it's going to get. The economy's never going to be stronger, and they're still spending $2 trillion more than they bring in. But as it gets wide, the debt goes parabolic. Because as it widens, that's that much more you need to borrow the next year and the next year and the next year. And as the total debt grows, as it's currently at 38 trillion. This only updates, I think, once a year. So it'll be 38 in a couple of months. But as the debt balance grows, so does the interest on that debt. And so that becomes another line item that grows even more. So you got a bloated spender, and the debt is just snowballing. The VIG, the interest is just climbing, and you're paying interest on interest on interest on interest. And pretty soon your grandkids are being taxed to pay for stuff they gave you as a teenager. And investors are waking up to this. And you need to look no further than the price of gold. Gold is currently sitting around $4,000 an ounce. It was $4,400 a couple of weeks ago. But this is a big move up from down there in this $1,500 to $2,000 range where it's spent the last several years. And I believe the Great Awakening is taking place because of what happened with Trump and Doge and Elon Musk. You see, Elon Musk, I don't care how you feel about him. I think we can all agree he's a pretty sharp guy. Him, his team, support of President Trump, was, in my opinion, the best chance we were ever going to get to rein in the spending and get our government under control. And that didn't happen. Not only did it not happen, on his way out the door, as I said, they raised the debt limit by $5 trillion. They've still spent $1.82 trillion more to bring it in this year. Even with the tariffs, even with the economic boom, it's just never going to be fixed. And so when people saw that, they started digging into the numbers like I've done here and realized how bad it is. And once you see this stuff, you just can't unsee it. And I used to want nothing more than a giant account balance. I want commas in my account. I want to have millions liquid. And now it's the last thing I want. I want it tucked away in gold, in silver, in real estate. Some of you are big crypto guys. I'm not, but if you think that's the future, put it there. But don't put it in U.S. dollars. Now, if we step back and look at gold prices over the last couple of decades, you'll realize we're at the early stages of a new gold supercycle. We had this big, massive breakout. I've been talking about this for 2 years. This huge, let me put this in log scale to smooth it out. This huge price run up in the early 2000s, and then just this massive 13, 14-year tightening base right in here, been absorbing supply for the last couple of years, and once the lid came off of this thing, it just took off like a banshee. And when you step back and look at the big picture, gold doesn't look so expensive anymore. It spent 14 years going nowhere. It's got some ground to make up. And the last time it made a big run, the thing ran for an entire decade, went up over 600%. Right now, it has roughly doubled. Now, my estimation for gold, this is not tomorrow, it's not next week, but if I'm looking 2, 3, 5 years out into the future, I think we're going to see $8,000 to $10,000 an ounce in gold. Silver, another popular one. Silver, another precious metal, tends to run with gold. It is a bit more volatile. It's got a crazy checkered past. I got a video on if you want to read about it with the Hunt brothers rigging the price and all this kind of stuff. But silver's finally trying to get legs here for $50 a share, $50 an ounce, excuse me. And silver can easily get to $100 to $200 an ounce. Now, listen, I'm not trying to come off like Peter Schiff and be one of these wild gold bugs. I've just followed the money and laid out the math, and I don't see how this ends any other way than the government printing. It's the only way to fill the gap is to print money. The only other options are increase the money coming in. I mean, sure, you're already taxing us at 35, 40%. What are you going to go to, 60, 70, 80%? The top earners would flee this country. It wouldn't work. You'd cut the amount you spend. They've proven they're not going to do that. You can keep borrowing and raising, but who's going to keep blending the money at 3, 4%? The only one willing to do that is the Federal Reserve. And the Federal Reserve doesn't have money. They print it. That's how money printing works. The Federal Reserve buys government bonds, and they just print up the money to buy it from them and throw it out there into the market. And it's going to get worse. Inflation's going to go much, much, much higher. And I don't say all that to scare you, but we have to face facts. And in a rising inflation, what rising inflation means is the dollar is going to steadily lose more and more and more value. As they print more and more and more and more of them, they're worth less and less and less. So that's why I'm getting into gold. Now, gold has been on a tear for the last 18 to 20 months here. It did pull back over the last week or two, but I don't see this as a panic situation. It just went a little too far, a little too fast. And one thing I like to look at, when it comes to pullbacks, there's a couple of ways to do it. One is on a key moving average. One of the simplest ways to look at places to buy something you're long-term bullish on, believe it's going to be trending higher for months or years into the future, is to use something known as a Fibonacci retracement. Now, I'm not a big Fibonacci guy. All I'm really going to show you is you want to buy it when it comes back half of the run. Okay, so you kind of take where it started running here, and it just draws these little lines at like 38, 50, and 61%. And the fib fanboys out there can go into the math of all this and why they believe it works. I don't really think so. But what I've noticed is when you get big moves like this, something's going to continue, it generally will not go more than 50, maybe 60% down from that initial move before resuming higher. I'm not saying it can't, it couldn't roll over, but if the buyers are still there, if the demand is still high, this is usually where they step in. It's where the professionals begin buying the dip. And so you've got gold right here pretty much perfectly on that 50% retracement of the initial move. And we can go here from the bottom, and you see it's kind of right around in there. I tend to look at it from when it really started heating up, and the heat up move happened here when it began to break out. But either way, right around that kind of 40 to 60% range, that's going to be kind of that $3,800 to $4,000 range is where I'm looking to buy gold. We're currently sitting there, so I am currently or about to place an order for some more physical gold and silver. This is not advice. I'm not telling you what to do, just sharing my insights on what I'm doing with my money. So that is the real state of the United States government's fiscal position. So the next time you hear a politician get on TV and say that America is the richest nation on earth, try your best not to laugh. And if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button down there in the corner. That way these videos will show up in your stream and you won't miss another update.